And this is our last interview of the semester as well, Tina. So you are the grand finale, and we're so glad that you could join us for this. Is a little bit of background on what STEMxx Chats is. This is an initiative that's set up to empower women in STEM, and we do this through a variety of ways. But we really want to break down barriers between career stages and locations and propel positive change makers to really solve the big challenges of our day. We do this in a number of different ways. Right now, you're part of this interview here that is aimed at understanding the personal dimension of careers. A lot of the stuff that everybody can contribute to. Everybody has reasons why they chose their next their previous career step and what led them to this point. But often those stories don't get out. And there's a lot that is yet to be explored as to what really propels people in different directions, what are kind of personality factors, if you will, that can shape that. So we really want to expose this. And so the interviews like you're in tonight are part of that, as well as the career decision panels that we've been having. And we have our last one for the semester in 2 weeks, and that's on teaching and education career paths. And so that's also up Tina's alley, and this will be a good segue into that. And we'll have a professor join us. We'll have a couple of teachers. We'll have someone in ed tech, and we'll have someone who's in like experience design for curriculum design for teachers. So that'll be a fun panel coming up to close out our semester. And if you're not already, you can follow us on social media, check out our website to learn more and support us there. So without further ado, I'm very honored to have Tina Seelig join us here. And I've seen Tina, I've had the pleasure of watching Tina interview a number of entrepreneurs, a number of really incredible people. And it's so fun for me to be able to turn the tables here and get to interview you a bit, Tina. So
well,
Tina
it is
Seelig,
such a pleasure. I have to say to everyone's listening, Alice was in my class and was a complete and total rock star. I am honored to be here, and I would never say no to you, Alice.
Thank you for that. Wow, that's high praise. I really enjoyed so much. So the class that Tina is referring to, well, one of the classes, because I got to enjoy several, but as an auditor, but I was in one program that she spearheaded out of the Stanford Technology Ventures program. And that was really an incredible 9-month program where we got to explore entrepreneurship. So any Stanfordites are watching this video, I highly recommend you check that out. Tina is professor of the practice in Stanford University's Department of Management, Science, and Engineering. I believe you're still a faculty director of STVP. Is that correct?
It's true, but I also just took on a brand new role. Do you know that?
In the Stanford Hennessy Fellows.
In the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program. Yeah, I'm also the executive director there.
Incredible, incredible. A wonderful program as well, right? Very cool. She teaches courses in the D School at Stanford, leads 3 fellowship programs, is one of the examples that I mentioned, focused on creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. She earned her PhD in neuroscience at Stanford Medical School and has been a management consultant, entrepreneur, and author of 17 books, including Insight Out, Ingenious, What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20. So everyone can pick up these books afterwards for more in-depth responses. She is the recipient of the Gordon Prize from the National Academy of Engineering, the Olympus Innovation Award, and the Silicon Valley Visionary Award. So we're really honored to have you, Tina. Thank you for taking the time.
So you can ask me anything.
I love it. I love it. Well, as a bit of a roadmap, we wanted to start talking about your journey to where you are now. Kind of, tell your story, get your story out there. Start as early as you like, but I would love to hear your side of the story.
So I'm not going to go into all the details. I'm going to do a broad brush. And if anyone wants to ask any questions, you can either ask in the Q&A or the chat. And of course, Alice, you can dive deeper. I have to tell you, if anyone had told me when I was younger, when I was in college or graduate school even, that I would be doing what I am doing now, I would have been completely shocked and totally delighted. I would not have had any idea how I was going to get from there to here, but it's an amazing how time plays out and the opportunities that present themselves over time. So I started out in college, in high school, I'll say, I always assumed, and my parents definitely assumed that I was going to be a doctor. And I used to joke all the time that I always wanted to be an actress. And my parents wanted me to be a doctor, so I figured I'd act like a doctor. It's funny because, it's kind of a joke, but I did do a lot of acting when I was a young kid and when I was through high school and part of college. And you might have thought that was just a, kind of crazy extracurricular thing. But if you're a teacher, having acting skills and performing skills, and especially if you're giving a lot of public talks, what could be more important than having that training? So I would say that I would encourage anyone to take improv, acting, presentation skills. These skills serve you the rest of your life. So I went to college, and honestly, I was pre-med for my first 6 months, I would say. And I realized I hated the pre-med culture, hated it. I decided I didn't want to be pre-anything. I figured that I would take whatever I wanted, everything that sounded interesting, and I would see where my skills and my interests took me. And I took my first neuroscience class when I was in college, the end of my sophomore year, and was hooked, totally hooked. It was like falling in love. It was the first time I got to the frontier in a scientific field, and where the professor gave us problems such as, there's part of the brain, we don't know what it does. Design some experiments that you would do to figure out what it does. And I was like, oh my gosh, I actually get to design some experiments. And that just hooked me. In fact, there was a pivotal moment at that point where I got a paper back, and my professor wrote on the top of the paper, Tina, you think like a scientist.
Wow.
And that moment, you think about those people in your life who really have an influence. He had a huge influence. My saying, gosh, I do think like a scientist. And that at that moment, I became a scientist. So I ended up deciding to put together a major in neuroscience. And then I went on and did my graduate work in my PhD in neuroscience as well. It's a little bit of a funny story in there. And if you want to get into it later, because we can, once we know each other a little better, okay, everybody? Because I started graduate school back east, and then I dropped out and drove out to California and was a hippie chick for a while and transferred to Stanford. So there are all these interesting stories. I could tell the story to make it seem like it's totally organized and makes sense, and I was just a perfectly good girl. And then there's
that's not what we want.
the places where I really broke every rule. I have never gotten a job or into school in the normal way. I got into Stanford through the back door. And once I got in the door, I just put pedal to the metal and did my PhD in neuroscience. I was an electrophysiologist, got out of school, decided it was the middle of a really big recession. And I saw my colleagues, not getting grants, not getting position. It was just really a hard time. And I was getting married, and I didn't want to go do postdocs all over the place. I wanted to settle down. I don't know, I must have been around, I could figure out how I was probably around 26 or 27. I must have been 26 or 27 when I graduated. And I decided I didn't want to go move all over. I wanted to settle down. My husband had a job in Silicon Valley. So I had a really, really challenging time at that point, finding a job. Because I wanted to work in a startup company. I wanted to be in sort of the strategy side of biotech, but I was a biologist.
And where did that interest come? Like, when did that
I was
first
super
arise?
interested in, I'll tell you exactly, Alice. I didn't want the product of my work to just be research papers. I really wanted to be doing something that had an impact beyond just publications. And so I used to sit in the back of the classes at the business school. I used to pretend I was super little and sit in the back of the strategy classes. And so I would learn a little bit about business. And so I really wanted to be on the business side. It took me a really long time to get a job. I ended up talking my way into getting a job in consulting. Interesting story here. Okay, this is a pivotal story, is that I was looking for a job, and I got an introduction to someone at Booz Allen, the consulting firm. And I thought, okay, great, I can go there and I can use that network to see if they can introduce me to some of their clients, some of their med tech or life science companies. But I got in the door, and the guy who interviewed me looked at my resume, and he said, why would someone with a PhD in neuroscience be a good management consultant? Because he thought I was there for an interview. And I could have answered honestly. I could have said, well, gosh, I'm not considering a job as a management consultant. I really want to get a job in industry, but I didn't. I used that opportunity to say, well, gee, doing management consulting and doing brain research is exactly the same skill set. And he said, tell me more. So I said, okay, fine. And I just outlined all the parallels, because guess what? Doing brain research and doing research on companies is exactly, right? You figure out what the brain question is, you collect all your data, you analyze the data, you present it in a compelling way, you figure out what the next burning question is. He set up 6 more interviews that day, and I walked out at the end of the day with a job offer.
Wow.
So I went in thinking it was an informational interview, just, and I walked out with a job. So of course I took it. So I spent a couple years in consulting. Now, someone is asking a question. Sophia is asking, you mentioned you got in the back door at Stanford. Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about what happened. So we'll go back to that story. I started graduate school at UVA, University of Virginia. I really didn't want to be in school. I was doing all the things my parents wanted me to do, and I just so needed a break. And I came out to California over Christmas break to visit a guy I was dating. And that's another story. It's a guy I met at NIH during the summer. He was a normal volunteer there, like taking drugs. They were like paying these kids to take drugs. And I met him. He's lying in bed with IVs in his arms, And so I went out to go visit him in California. And I thought, oh my God, look at the picture behind me. It's like, why am I living there in the middle of the snow when I could be living here? And so I took a leave of absence from UVA. I drove out to California with my cat and Synapse. I had Synapse and Axon. So I drove out to California, and I was like a hippie chick. I just had to be a leaf in the wind. I think it was only a few months before I said, you know what, I need to start thinking more about neuroscience. So I started going to the UC Santa Cruz library and reading the journals. And then I started going once a week, and then every other day, and then every day. And I said, I need to get back in the lab. So I wrote a letter, like a real letter with a stamp and an envelope, to every single neuroscience faculty member at Stanford, because I was in Santa Cruz and I could just drive up there. And I wrote it, I said, I'm on leave of absence from UVA. I gave them, I had a lot of research experience. I'd worked at NIH 2 summers. I had done a bunch of research. And I'm looking for a research assistant position. I got letters back from everybody saying, no, we don't have a job. But one person passed my resume on to other people. And I got a phone call. From, this is really funny because I have a, one second, I'm getting something.
I have a prop coming.
I have a prop. No, it's a really amazing prop. I got a phone call from the guy who invented the oximeter. You know these oximeters, right?
Wow.
That measure oxygen saturation. Well, These were invented at Stanford, and they were doing clinical trials on oximeters. And
oh my gosh.
Someone as a research assistant to work
pioneering
in the operating room to be the person testing these during high-risk cases. And they said, do you want this? I said, yes. So I drove up to Palo Alto, got an apartment, moved in, and was up at the crack of dawn watching surgeries. And I was often the first person in the room who knew that the patient was in trouble because I could see their oxygen saturation was going down. Wow. So I now had my foot in the door. And after that project ended, after a few months, I started just knocking on doors. And my future PhD advisor was looking for a postdoc but I convinced her that she should hire me as a research assistant. So I started as a research assistant in the lab. Is this too much detail?
This is wonderful. No, and I think it's phenomenal, and we see the entrepreneurial drive,
right? Just big,
everything that you're saying.
So what happened is I got in this lab, I started doing research, and it was electrophysiology. And I said, I've got some ideas. Can I do my own experiments? And she said, you can do them after hours. So I would do her experiments during the day, and then I would stay after hours and do my own experiments. And the work I was interested in, the results were very promising. And she said she would support me as a PhD student. So at that point, I applied to the PhD program. Now you have to realize only 4 people were accepted a year. So this was not like, sure, apply, you'll get in. And the people who were leading the program, the neuroscience program, made me jump through flaming hoops. They said, well, we don't know. We don't like people coming in the back door. So they made me take a class. It was a sensory physiology class. And not only had I already taken the material, but I was super motivated. So I did very well. And they accepted me. And that day that I got accepted to Stanford into the PhD program, I believe is the proudest moment of my life. And I made it happen. There was no way I was going to have gotten in through the normal routes. And funny story, Carla Schatz, who was the brand new faculty member who's in charge of admissions, is now the head of the BioX program at Stanford, and we have stayed good friends. So interesting to see that was so many years ago, the trajectory. So that's the story, Sophia, how I talked my way into it. So the same sort of thing, I was at Booz Allen. I spent a couple years as a consultant. I left after 2 years. I was starting a family. I was pregnant with our son, Josh, who's now 31. And I decided to write my first book when I was pregnant. This is a book that I had started in graduate school. This is a book on the chemistry of cooking. And what happened is when I was in graduate school, I realized I understood in great depth what was happening in my lab, but not in my kitchen. And I made a list of all the things I didn't understand. And I started writing the book in grad school. And I thought, you know what? I actually should be writing my thesis, not a book on the chemistry of cooking. So I put it aside, but I picked it up when I was pregnant. And so I wrote that book, and it got published by Scientific American. It's called The Epicurean Laboratory. And then after that book got published, I can't believe I'm telling you all the details, I said, there's got to be a better way to market books. And so I started my first company, which was called Book Browser, which was a multimedia system to help match books with buyers. And to make a long story short, I built that venture. I sold it. I then went back to writing books. I did a whole bunch of, let's see, if I turned off the camera, you would see I've got a dozen kids books that I have up here that I've written. So I started writing kids books, kids science books. And then when my son was 10, so I was working on my own, starting this company, writing books, I decided I wanted to get back to work at least part-time. And so I decided I only wanted to work at Stanford. I wanted to have a little bit more flexibility in my schedule. And I took the job. This is a really important little story here that I'm going to tell you. I took the job that you would have said, why did you take this job? What happened is I was looking for a job, and I pulled offline the description of a job for the Stanford Technology Ventures program. And it was entrepreneurship and innovation and technology and education. I thought, wow, this is super cool. But the job was so junior. I mean, so junior. It was like administrative assistant type of job. And I had a PhD. I'd started companies. I'd been a management consultant. I crumpled it up and I threw it in the garbage. And the next day I pulled it out of the garbage. I said, there's something in here. There's something interesting. So I flattened it out and I applied. And I got an interview. And I got another and another and another. I had 11 interviews for that job, 11 interviews. And they offered it to me, and I took it. And the key is that what happened is the job was something I could do with my, in a fraction of the time that was allotted. So I had lots of extra free time. So I just kept doing more and kept volunteering to do more and kept raising my hand. I'll do that. I'll run that conference. I'll give that talk. I'll teach that course. And pretty soon, so after one year, they made me the director of the center. The next year I became the executive director of the center. I set my sights on what would have to happen for me to become a professor And it took 13 years, but eventually I became professor in our department. And the lesson that's really, really important here is you do not get a job. You get the keys to the building. And once you get the keys to the building, you can do anything. So now, after 20 years working at the Stanford Technology Ventures program, I got offered to run the Knight Hennessy program with John Hennessy, who used to be the president of Stanford for 16 years. And I started that just a couple months ago. So that's my story. I know that was a lot, but that was a lot.
It's phenomenal. And there's so many things that we could unpack in there as well. But I think, one thing that really jumps out to me is something that I think is so important for us to talk about, and is something that we do talk a lot about in STEMxx Chats, which is grit and tenacity. And I think, there's so many pivotal moments in there where you really pushed through and you really found a way, dug your heel in. Can you walk us through a little bit? I mean, hindsight, 2020 vision looking back, but in the moment, right, for people in the audience that are thinking, oh my gosh, could I do that? Can you walk us through a little bit?
Yeah. So
how do you handle that?
You walk us through a time where, what was the specific question?
Where you were facing one of those decisions.
Oh yeah. Well, oh my gosh, so many. I would say the most challenging decision was to leave graduate school. Okay. Because this was the right thing to do. That's what everyone expected. My parents came down to UVA, bought me all this wonderful little furniture, in my apartment. We got a door and cinder blocks and created a desk. And I had all this, and the idea that I just left, my stomach was in knots. My brain was churning, but I knew in my heart that I was in the wrong place. And when I got out to California, the entrepreneurial spirit, the feeling I had, I felt like I could finally breathe, that I was in a place where I was going to thrive. And I think you need to listen to yourself. You need to listen to what's really in your heart, and not just do what everybody is telling you is the right decision. My parents now, they're so proud, and they admit I made the right decisions. But it was super hard for them at the beginning. Oh, here's a really funny little story. When I was graduating from college and starting grad school, my parents bought me my first car. It was a Chevy Citation. Look it up. It's like a crappy car. I got this car, and I was very proud of my little brand new car that I'd never had a car before. And so when I told them that I was going to be leaving school and going to California, they were so mad. They said, fine, we're taking away the car. And I said, no worries, I'll just get a motorcycle. Okay, keep the car. Of course, it came back to haunt me because my kid at one point got really mad at me and bought a motorcycle. So it came back to haunt me.
Big threat there.
Yeah.
No, that's really
I see some questions are coming in. Should I respond to them?
You can. We can also take some later.
Okay,
let people upvote on there, and we'll keep on track here. If there's anything you see that you think would integrate well, feel free. But the other thing that I just want to highlight from what you were saying is I think sometimes young people have this programmed mentality, and they're looking for their perfect path forward, and they want to know what is that thing that I'm meant to do. And I think, the more people we talk to, the more we see how careers really evolve over time, right? And you've done so many different things and it's
if someone wants to know more about these journeys, I encourage you to take a look at my book, What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20, because the book is all about these type of adventures, not just my own, but lots of other people. And a big lesson in it is that uncertainty is a gift. That we often feel really frustrated when there's so much uncertainty in our life, and we want it just all to be nailed down and painted pretty. But you know what? If someone gave you the alternative option and said, we're going to give you a script for your life you're going to play out, you'd be super unhappy. So understanding that the uncertainty is actually a gift, and you get to write your own script, you get to write it every single day. So reframing the uncertainty in your life as really something positive as opposed to negative is very, very helpful.
Very cool. Very good. Okay, so now we made it into your current state in life here and your current job. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to have your current role?
I have a great job, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. I always put myself in positions where I'm stretched a little bit. I'm a believer that it's really nice to be always in a place where the steps are big enough to be challenging, but small enough that you're pretty confident you can make it. It's like, jumping across a chasm, like, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to die. But it's going to be, I have to train for this. I have to do something. And taking on this new job at this point, after I'd been an STVP for so long, where it was very straightforward and I knew exactly what was going to happen. And I built the program and I knew everything upside down, from top to bottom. To go somewhere new where you're constantly stretching has been great. So I am very much enjoying the challenge always to do for creative problem solving. And whether that's designing a new course or designing an organization or figuring out what new products and features we should add to what we're doing, that makes me really excited about getting up every day. And also just working with amazing students. I learn as much, way more maybe, from them as they learn from me. And so I view myself very much as a provocateur. I'm less of someone who's going to get up and give a big lecture and telling you what you should think or what you should know. But I view my job as asking provocative questions to get people to think more deeply themselves.
Very good. Yeah. And I think, you also have some amazing teaching tools and, even habits. I don't know if you want to share any with us now. And I'm thinking about some gratitude, things related to gratitude that maybe would benefit our audience.
Yeah, I have learned that one of the most important things to do is being appreciative and grateful. And one of the things I do is at the end of every single day, I send thank you notes to everybody who has done something for me that day. And anything big, small, medium, it takes only a few minutes to kind of look through your calendar and see what was who influenced you that day, but taking the time to acknowledge it not only closes the loop with them, but it also and makes them realize how appreciative you are. But you end up feeling really grateful for all the people who've contributed to your success.
It's very cool. I love it a lot. I love it a lot. And, also in terms of your job, and I think you talked a lot about desire for flexibility. And that's something you still have quite a bit of, right, in your current job?
Absolutely. I feel, flexibility, both in schedule, but also flexibility of what you can do and how you can contribute. That having a canvas that has a lot of empty space that you can say, great, this is a time for us to, I want to build it out here. I want to build it out here. What can we do in this area is always wonderful. And I would argue that in any organization or any place, Alice, I can turn it back to you. You probably can look around and see the places where you can make a difference, where there are sort of open spaces in the organization or in the community where you can say, just like this podcast, you say, I think there's a place where I could contribute by having conversations about women in STEM, and let me go take that on.
Right. Very good. Very good. And in terms of positive impact, I think, kind of moving into reflections, lessons, advice that you might want to share in addition to all the gems that you've already shared. What would you say that are some of the opportunities that people in your field, right, have to make a positive impact?
I've been teaching classes on creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship. And the thing that's really important is to know that these are tools for bringing ideas to life. And knowing that you can, with these tools and this mindset, really, really make a big difference as in your teams, in your organizations, and in the community as large. So I see these tools as a way for people to really be change makers. And one of the things I'm most proud of is a course that I've been teaching. Next quarter will be the third time, called Inventing the Future. And this, I don't know if you know about this class, Alice. It's a class where every week we take a different frontier technology and we do have a debate looking at the utopian and dystopian consequences of these different technologies. It could be lab-grown meat. It could be drones for delivering packages. It could be personal robots. It could be designer babies. We have all different things that we focus on. Really, really interesting debates. And we're also teaching the students in parallel all sorts of tools for divergent thinking. How do you start looking at the ways that these technologies will change over time, and convergent thinking, looking at evaluating the impact of them. So they're getting all of these tools in parallel with debating all of this technology. So that's kind of fun. And I'm really proud of this because I think what we're doing is preparing the next generation of entrepreneurs so that they are inoculated against making decisions that are going to have really dire long-term consequences.
Very good. No, I think it's super, super important, and especially in STEM, to consider ethical implications before we jump into it.
Exactly.
It's incredibly important. Yeah. So I ask about, positive impact, all the people that we talk to. And I think, it's a very open-ended question. I think it's interesting in your case that, being in a teaching environment, right, you have ample opportunities for impact in that regard. And it's kind of interesting, the subject matter that you teach, really is so applicable to so many different areas. And, each individual then can really take that to 10x impact because they're such powerful tools. That's really amazing. Yeah. And I guess another takeaway from this would be to dive into some of those tools. And I don't know if you have any resources you would kind of put our audience.
Oh, yes. I have lots of resources. In fact, I could put it in the chat if you want. One of my ecorner.stanford.edu is a very, you guys can find the link, ecorner.stanford. We have thousands of podcasts and videos and articles all on entrepreneurial leadership. Every week we bring in high profile or up and coming entrepreneurs to talk about what they're doing. And this is a gold mine of information. You can get the podcast that'll come out every single week, and super, super proud of that as a collection of resources that we share with the world.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, so we have some good questions coming in, and I think maybe we'll wrap things up in the end and give you the floor for any other advice, pearls of wisdom that you want to tie things together with. Audience, feel free to keep putting questions into the Q&A, and to also upvote if you see questions there that you really want answered, because we want to get through everything, but we'll take things as they come here. In the chat, I think there's also an interesting one. This is from a high schooler. So Delali asks, given that as a high schooler there can be limited opportunities to shadow, study people in fields of interest, which are really crucial experiences, how do you think, she asked, how might we change that? Perhaps, what would you advise as a high schooler now to circumvent that? And then maybe you have other thoughts about how we might change that.
Okay, so that's a really interesting question. First of all, I think that in this day and age, it's so much easier for a high schooler than it was when I was your age. First of all, the internet. Have you heard of the internet? You can go onto the internet, you can go onto YouTube and find videos of anything. I remember, I was really interested in neuroscience, and the only access I had is I would read my parents' medical encyclopedia. I remember I learned how to do neurosurgery by reading the medical encyclopedia. And I think the resources online are just boundless to look at and figure out whether, and so I really encourage you to just go do your own research to find out what people are doing. Also, be bold. Reach out to people. One of the things that is true now that wasn't true then is you can reach people if you may or may not get an answer, but if you write a short email, don't send something long. The longer the email I get, for example, the less likely I am going to read it right away. Just say, hey, I'm really excited about what you're doing. Is there any chance I could shadow you? Or is there any chance you have something? Ask some simple question. You know what? You might just, with showing your enthusiasm and passion, get someone who's going to respond and say, sure, come on over. I would be delighted. So that's one thought. Was there any piece of it that very crucial? Oh, yes, I have a big, bold idea. I am a huge proponent of virtual reality. I think that's going to end up becoming a very, very powerful teaching tool, especially for young people. Imagine you want to be an astronaut and you can have a virtual experience being an astronaut. I think that'll be really fun. Or a neurosurgeon. I think we're going to create all sorts of opportunities for young people to imagine, to see themselves and to feel what it's like to be in these roles before they start their long education.
Very cool. I love it. And I would add that STEMxx Chats also exists in part because of that very thing. So stay with us. All right. We have another question from Nicole. What is your favorite and least part aspect of management consulting?
Okay. So management consulting, interesting. I did it for 2 years. I would not have done it any longer. It was a very hard job. You come in as a young person, as a junior person, and you work really, 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 really hard, but you learn a tremendous amount. I found that being a management consultant for me was an alternative to going to the business school, and they paid me as opposed to my paying them. So I got 2 years doing, basically, they were living case studies. You had a business, a problem that you had to solve. You were working on a team, and you were delivering. Not only were you learning all the analytic tools, but you also had a real client. So I think it's a very interesting alternative to going to business school. So that was, and I still have great friends who I met during those years.
Very good. We actually had a consulting panel as our last event. So I think some people are on high alert to consulting.
Yeah, think about that.
It's very cool. All right. What advice would you give to someone who's considering going to grad school, wants to make a direct impact in the world, but is worried that going to grad school will only produce research papers in the process?
Okay, good question. So here's the story. Going to grad school is not about creating research papers. It's about learning how to think. It's learning how to look at the world, how to be comfortable with uncertainty. The skills that you learn as a PhD student, I'm assuming you're talking about a PhD student, the skills you learn are lifelong skills. People ask me, do I use my skills from my PhD in neuroscience? And I say all the time, because even though I'm not doing things in neuroscience, I understand when I get a complex problem, how to take it apart, how to think about designing experiments to test ideas. Also, it allows me to be more analytical in looking at other people's research. You read the paper differently when you've had this education. So the other thing, especially I would say for a woman getting a PhD, you know what? Nobody can take that PhD away from you. Having that PhD after your name is a very meaningful sign of your intelligence, your ability to do something really hard and complete it. And so that badge, I used to always think, I'm curious if you agree with me, Alice. I used to think of my friends who, during the same time I was doing my PhD, were working and they would get promotions and raises, and it was all very nice. But at the end, I had a PhD, and I had something very, very tangible that I could show for that work.
Very good. All right, we have a question related to the balance of intuition and then reasoning / advice from others. I think this is in regards to career decision-making. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so one thing to realize is things make much more sense in the rearview mirror. You're going to always be looking at the precipice and what you should do, and you are not going to know. Even when you apply for a job or you get a job, you have no idea what that job is going to be. you have a fantasy about what it's going to be, it is going to be different. Just like if you're going to get married, it's going to be different than you expect. So you make decisions based on all the information you have, and you should be very aware that that really is a fantasy to help you make that decision, because really you're doing a lot of things based on just trusting that it's going to work out. The other thing that's important to keep in mind is if you don't burn bridges, you're always going to be growing. One of the metaphors that I have come to use with talking to students about their career is that every experience that you have is like a bead on a necklace. And you're collecting these beads, and nobody's necklace is like anybody else's. In the end, it's going to be very interesting and beautiful and yours. And that all of them add up and collectively become something where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. The other thing is, I know that for me, I used to change careers every couple of years, whether I needed to or not. I didn't even tell you about half of the other jobs I had in there, skipped over a few chapters. But the fact is, at some point, the breadth of my experiences created an incredible depth of skills that I could apply in almost any setting I went into. So realizing it doesn't matter what you do, because you're going to be extracting learnings and skills. As one of my former students, Amy Chang, who became a senior executive at Cisco and has started several companies, said, the higher you go in an organization, the more common the skills are. At the bottom, they're going to be more, the skills are going to be more differentiated. You need to use this specific tool or this instrument. But once you move up in the organization and you're a leader, those skills become much more generic. And so the skills that you get in one place can clearly be applied in another.
Very good. All right. So Mariana wants to know, how do you know when you should take the first opportunity that comes versus wait for a better one?
Oh my goodness. I have been in that situation so many times. And this is really, really a common experience, because when you're interviewing for jobs, you are never going to get all the answers in parallel. They're all going to come in series, and they're going to have often exploding offers where they go, you need to tell us next week, or you need to tell us tomorrow. And so you're waiting for something else. It's really hard. You just need to listen to your gut. I know that when I was looking for a job, and I mentioned I went through a difficult time where it was really hard, I got a job, actually a really, really interesting job. And my husband was not enthusiastic about my taking it, mostly because it was located in a place in San Francisco. It wasn't a great neighborhood. And he just didn't want me working there, like in that spot, not the job. And I didn't take it, and I really, really regretted it afterwards, because it took me a very long time to find another job. But it ultimately all worked out anyway. I think you are who you are, no matter what job you go. Right? So let's see if we can play this out. Let's say there are a whole bunch of opportunities. Again, you don't know what it's sort of like, it's not what happens to you, but what you make of it. So no matter what job you walk into, you're going to make it of something. And if it doesn't work out, guess what? You're not an indentured servant. You can go and leave and do something else. So understanding that change in your job is not unusual as you're trying to figure out what the best place is. In fact, I would tell people look at me and go, oh my gosh, you've been so successful. How did you do it? And I say, you know how old I was when I started working at Stanford? Alice, do you know how old I was when I started working at Stanford?
I wouldn't even dare to guess.
Yeah, I was 41. It's 41. So my basic, and I came in again at this junior level, and then I finally found a place that was a really, really great match for my skills and my interests and my everything. And so that's when everything took off. But everything else I did before had prepared me for finally getting to somewhere where I could put down roots and say, this is a comfortable place to be.
And is this going to be comfortable for a while, you think, Tina, or you think?
Well, you know what? It's a really good question. One of the things that's important to realize, and you know this, I'm sure, about academics, things are always changing, right? The context is changing, the people are changing. It's a very dynamic context, which keeps it very fresh for a long time.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, and there's so many new ideas that you can have within your job too that
Exactly.
keep you interested. All right, so we have a question related to sexism, being a woman in STEM. You have any experiences, any advice you want to pass on there?
Yeah, it's really funny because yes, there have been times I'm sure that I was treated differently as being a woman in STEM, but I always celebrated being one of the only women in the room and saw that as an advantage as opposed to a disadvantage. I did find that when I was in consulting, there was a lot of sexism and I was treated pretty poorly. But then I got out of there and said, you know what, this is not a place I want to be. So, and it wasn't until afterwards that I actually realized that the way I was being treated was because of sexism, because some of my other women colleagues told me about similar experiences. When I was in it, I actually took it personally and sort of thought, wow, I'm being treated this way because, I didn't do something right. Whereas I realized I was being treated this way because I was different. Mm-hmm. I think if you really get to know people and deal with people in really honest relationships, the sexism piece starts to dissipate. So it's really about building meaningful relationships where people trust you. One of the things that I always have done is find out how to make other people successful, right? When I got to Stanford, one of the things I did is my colleague Tom Byers, who I worked for at the time, I would go out of my way to figure out what can I do to make him successful? How do I make other people successful? And the more I helped make other people successful and not make it just about me, the more successful I became, because it was in their best interest to create opportunities for me, because this also helped make them look good. Does that make sense?
It does.
I'm hoping you understand. It's not about, one of the things that took me a very long time to learn, because I was a girl, and in the time when I was growing up, girls didn't participate in sports very much. And we didn't do a lot of teamwork in our classes. So I didn't have a lot of experience with teamwork. I didn't have a lot of experience. So it took me until many years to realize my job was to work really effectively on a team and to make other people successful. It wasn't just about me. And so I think that's one of the things that ended up ultimately making me more successful, even on teams that were mostly men.
Very cool. All right, we have two more excellent questions that I see have an upvote here that I want to dive into, if you're up for it, Tina.
Sure.
This one I really love. In your work and experience, have you seen how neuroscience or psychology can be paired with entrepreneurship and business? I think there's a lot of opportunities for this, right? And I think it's interesting for people who are, have interest in psychology, neuroscience, how that fits in to the business world. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So can you hold on one second?
Sure thing.
Oh, in my purse. Yeah, probably. Okay, sorry. My son is looking for my car key.
Also important.
Also important because he's taken off. So, first of all, neuroscience and psychology undermine everything we do, right? So the more you understand about this, the more you end up being a better team player, the more you end up understanding your customers, and the more you understand your organization. So this is absolutely an important set of knowledge that can definitely be applied in the business world. Absolutely.
Very good. All right. And then another area that we often talk about is related to work-life balance. And we have a question related to balancing family life with job search and ultimately your new job. Would you like to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So balancing work and family, really interesting issue. And everybody has to figure out how they're going to do this themselves. I think that women actually have a secret weapon that they often don't realize, is that when you have a young family, you kind of have a pass. People don't expect that you're going to be working full time, that your career is going to be pedal to the metal. So you can do a lot of experimenting kind of under the radar. I did in that 10 years, the first 10 years of being a parent, lots and lots of experiments, whether it was starting companies or writing books or teaching. I just did consulting in different places, tried lots of different things and started building sort of a portfolio of skills so that when I was ready to sort of work full time, I had really developed so many skills that could be applied. I think when you're trying to work full time and have a kid, if that's the path you want to take, then guess what you need to do? And I've talked to my colleagues all the time about this, my women colleagues, and we tell it to all our students, get help. You need a team. Get as much help as you can. When I look back, the major thing I would have done differently when I was a young parent is I would have figured out how to get more help. It was so hard. It put a tremendous pressure on my family life. I'm going to tell you something very private, but I actually write about it in my book, Creativity Rules, in the chapter on framing. So I had to get permission from my husband to talk about this, but it's something that I'm happy to share with you. My husband and I were separated for 2 years. Do you know this, Alice?
I do.
We were separated for 2 years when our son was between 3.5 and 5.5 years old.
Wow.
I moved out. It was so stressful trying to balance everything and not having any help. And I just was miserable. And I look back and I think if we had had more help, the pressure would have been really relieved. So I tell you this as a cautionary tale. It is very difficult to have a very full-time, intense career while you also have young children, unless you have a support system. The other option, as I said, is to scale back your career and use that time for a different type of exploration.
Right. Well, kudos for making it all come together, though.
You know what? I feel extremely delighted because looking back on that, it was a super hard time, but we made it out, and we're happier than we could have ever have been if that hadn't happened.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Very good. Okay, perhaps one last question. How do you, and because a lot of the things you've been talking about are a bit freelance in nature, right? Some of these side experiments you're talking about. How do you keep a good work ethic amid all of that and stay motivated in that kind of independent style?
Yeah, motivation is really important, and picking a project you're really excited about. Interestingly enough, when I wrote my first book, I wrote it over the course of the 9 months of my being pregnant and the next 9 months when I had a new baby. I was much more efficient after I had a new baby when I had limited time to work, because I had to work while he was napping and, in all the little free moments of time I could find. Whereas when I had open-ended time, it was easier for me to procrastinate. So I find, the old adage, if you want something done, give it to the busiest person. When I wrote my book, What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20, I got up every morning and wrote from 6 to 9 every morning. So giving yourself a goal and breaking it into pieces. So for example, if I say, okay, I've got to write a book. It's 50,000 words. I want to have it done in a year. It's this many words a week. It's this many a day. It's like, okay, if I write a page a day, then I'm going to be on track. Or if I write 3 pages every 2 days, giving yourself a very specific goal and some very short-term milestones that feel much more doable. And so breaking the project into pieces really does help make it more digestible.
Very good. I love it. Well, Tina, you shared great advice with us in so many different dimensions. Is there anything else you want to leave our audience with?
Yeah, so there are a zillion things I could tell you. I just want to say that enjoy the journey. There are really hard times, but think about the fact that this is part of your process of growing, and try to take a meta view of what's going at the moment, and know that, for example, if you're a student now and it's really difficult, this isn't going to be forever. If you're in a job that's really challenging, this isn't going to be forever, and understand that it's part of a longer journey. My parting message is one that I share in my book, What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20. is the idea of never missing an opportunity to be fabulous. If you really look at every experience you have as an opportunity to do your very best work, amazing things will happen. To not sort of just put in your time, but to really put in your energy and your passion into everything you do and find the opportunities, even in the challenges. I promise you, you're going to end up with a path forward that is going to be very exciting. And you too will end up at my ripe old age and you will say, you know what? I am doing something that I'm completely shocked and totally delighted that I made it here. So thank you very, very much.
Very good. I love it. You are fabulous, Tina Seelig. Thank you so much for everything. This was really, really insightful, and I think our audience has a lot to chew on there. So
great. Thank you. It's really, really my pleasure. And Alice, thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you. And look forward to catching up again soon.
Wonderful. Well, hopefully we'll all have a chance to see each other in person at some point in the future.
Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, I still have a diploma to pick up. So
oh my goodness.
Maybe I'll make it back.
Excuse, I'm sure they don't know how to mail it.
I don't think so. Yeah.
No, they're going to want to come back and get it. Great. Thank you so much. And wishing the best to all of you. Ciao. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Bye-bye.